What is going on, YouTube? Thank you so much for clicking on my channel and for joining me for this discussion about the case of Macin Smith. Now, I first came across the Macin Smith case when I was watching the show Disappeared several years ago on the original season of Disappeared, because Disappeared has come and gone several times throughout the years on Investigation Discovery. So the original season of Disappeared was the first time that I came across the Macin Smith case. Now, I have watched every single episode of Disappeared, and about 95% of the episodes I have watched multiple times because it's one of my favorite shows next to Unsolved Mysteries. I'm not the kind of person to watch things more than once, but when it comes to Disappeared and Unsolved Mysteries, I watch those episodes several times. And there have been cases on Disappeared that have really stuck with me for some reason, that have really resonated with me for some reason, and the Macin Smith case is one of them, because it was just so mysterious how a 17-year-old kid just walks out of his house, supposedly had walked out of his house, and is just never seen again. So on September the 1st, 2015, that's when his parents had reported him missing. The night before, on August the 31st, or the day before, on August the 31st, Macin was really excited because he had done really well in school. He had gotten straight A's, and he had texted his grades to his mother, telling his mom, hey, look at my grades. I did really well. And our agreement was, if I did well, you would allow me to watch my anime. So the mother agreed that when he came home, that he could watch his anime. So later on that night, after he came home from school, he was in his room. The family had retired it was him and his parents that were living in the home at the time. Macin did have older siblings. I think he was the youngest of 5 or 6 children. He did have older siblings, but they had all moved out. So in the home was just him and his mom and dad. So later on that night, the parents and Macin retired to their rooms, and Macin gets on his laptop to watch anime. I think at some point in the middle of the night, the father had woken up and he went to go check to see if Macin was still on his laptop. And from the light that was coming from underneath the door, the father was able to conclude that, okay, he is still on his laptop. So what they ended up doing that night was they turned off the Wi-Fi so that he wouldn't have a connection, and this would hopefully force him to go to bed because he had school the next morning. So the next morning, which was September the 1st, 2015, the parents report that morning, the father woke up, he went to Macin's room, he got Macin up, or he was making sure that Macin was awake. I don't know if there was a face-to-face encounter between the father and Macin that morning, but the father said he went to make sure that Macin was up, getting ready for school. The father went to go lay back down. I think the mother was also still in the bedroom that morning, and both parents attest that they heard Macin getting ready for school, and they heard him leave the house, I guess, to go wait for the school bus. Well, that day, Macin did not report to school at all. And later on, when he was supposed to be home and he wasn't home, obviously the parents got worried. They contacted the school. The school told the parents that he did not report to school that day. And later on that evening, they reported him missing. So once he was reported missing, of course, law enforcement gets involved. They start doing their investigation. The parents themselves, they're trying to figure out what happened to their son. They had gone into his room, and they looked in his room, and they saw that he had left his wallet behind. Now, the parents he left his wallet behind. The parents had taken his laptop and his cell phone, I think, the night before. So those items were not with him, and his wallet was not with him. Now, the mother said that she had looked through his wallet, and she had found a 3-page handwritten letter that she had found in the wallet, written allegedly by Macin. And in the letter, he talks about how he didn't want to be around anymore. He didn't want to exist anymore. And in the letter, he also had berated his parents. Now, his mother's name is Tracy, and his father's name is Darren Smith. So according to his parents, Macin did suffer from depression. I remember his mother had said on the show Disappeared that both her and Macin suffered from seasonal depression. And when they used to live in Canada, because the nights were long and it was, very, very cold, whenever the weather would change during the wintertime, her and her son would experience, severe bouts of depression. And so the parents decided that if they moved to a climate that was a little bit warmer, it would probably help with his seasonal depression. And that's how they ended up in this state of Utah. Now, also keep in mind, I don't think this really plays a factor, but it just kind of adds context to the story. Macin was born with a speech impediment where I remember the mother saying in the show Disappeared that when he talked like the way a person who was hearing impaired would talk, but he wasn't hearing impaired. And he was bullied a lot in school over that. I don't think that factors into his disappearance. That's just a side note. So the dad says that he definitely heard Macin leave for school when he went back to sleep. When he went back into the room, he definitely heard Macin leave the house. And after the father went back into the room to go back to sleep, he woke up a little bit later and then he went to the gym. Now, there are some, according to certain law enforcement officials, there are some inconsistencies in the parents' statement. For example, one particular inconsistency is that the dad said that he woke Macin up, he went back into his room to go back to sleep. I guess before he fell asleep, both mom and dad heard Macin getting ready for school and leaving the house. The dad then got out of bed and then he went to go work out at the gym. Now, when they did their investigation at the gym, the law enforcement officials were able to conclude that the father's gym card was swiped or used at 7:45 a.m. The bus is scheduled to pick up Macin at 7:41 a.m. So and then the gym is about 10 minutes away from the Smith's residence. So if he heard his son leave in the morning and the son was supposed to leave before 7:41, how is it that he ended up at the gym at 7:45 at a location that is about 10 minutes away from the house? So the dad, his explanation of that is the gym's timestamp might have been inaccurate. That's how he explains that situation. I don't know if they were able to conclude or not conclude whether or not the gym's computer system or swiping mechanism was defective that day, but it just would not have given him enough time to go back to bed, get back up, get ready, go to the gym, which is 10 minutes away, and be there in 4 minutes. It just wouldn't have happened. Now, introducing now into the mix of characters is a retired police detective, no name given. There's a retired police detective who was involved in the search for Macin. He worked for a search and rescue organization, and this person was a retired detective. And this particular person had claimed that he had a conversation with the father, Darren Smith, several times. And he claimed that the father told him that he never heard Macin leave the house that morning. And he also claimed that the father told him that it could have been possible that Macin had left the house in the middle of the night. The parents, another thing, this person also said that the parents were not involved in the search of their son. The parents themselves say that they were told not to participate in the search because law enforcement officials told them that we don't want you to be the ones to discover his body. So they claim that they were told to not even be a part of the search. The parents say that this particular police detective that's saying these things about them, saying that, the father wasn't completely truthful about when he heard or if he heard his son leave the morning of September the 1st. This person going around telling people that the parents, must be involved in some way because they're not even involved in the search of their son. The parents were saying that this retired detective is actually just an attention seeker. And when this person came on the scene, law enforcement kind of treated the parents differently. They kind of treated the parents more like suspects than grieving parents who are trying to locate their son. moving on from there. So both parents took lie detector tests, and supposedly they both passed. The father has claimed on multiple occasions that he doesn't have a problem speaking with law enforcement. He says that when they interviewed him, or when they interrogated him, he was okay with it. He was like, they could have asked me anything. They could have kept me there for however long they needed to keep me there. I had no problem talking to law enforcement. I had no problem taking a lie detector test. And he claimed that the lie detector person, or the lie detector officiant, had told him that his wife had passed, and supposedly the father had passed the lie detector test as well. So law enforcement who were investigating the case, they had written in a 2016 warrant that the parents never called them to check on the status of the case. That's another kind of like issue with the case, is that law enforcement officials saying that the parents never called to see where they were at with the search of their son, never checked on any type of status, because normally in a situation like this, the families of the missing person or the families of the victim will hound and harass police officers. I've heard of cases where relatives are calling police officers every single day on the clock. They'll call every single day at a particular time that day. And this will go on for many, many, many months, even many years. They'll do this. They'll constantly call every single day, checking for status on the case. And in this situation, so many people had reported that the Smiths never really checked in on the case with law enforcement at all. So when it was discovered that the father, Darren Smith, was conducting his own searches, he was searching for his son alone, law enforcement had put a GPS tracker on his truck just to kind of monitor his movements and, trying to figure out where he was going and what he was doing. Now, when Darren Smith found out that law enforcement had put a GPS tracker on his truck, he said he was okay with it. He says, I have nothing to hide. I was perfectly okay once I found out that they put a GPS tracker on my truck. They could do whatever they want. They can follow me, put trackers on my vehicles. I have nothing to hide. And so the GPS tracking really didn't lead to anything. It didn't increase any type of suspicion against the father. So in defense of the accusation that the parents were not checking in on the status of the case with the police department, the mother, Tracy Smith, said that she would text and email the lead detective on the case several times, but it came to a point where she felt like she was bothering the detective, and so she decided to stop communicating with or reaching out to that particular detective. Like I said, there are so many cases where we've heard where family members don't care if they're a nuisance. They will continue to be a nuisance until they get the information that they're seeking. Now, the mother says that she has defended her husband since day one. Like, there's just no way that the father was involved in the disappearance of Macin. She said it just doesn't make any sense that on the day my son disappears, my husband goes to the gym. What she was trying to say was the assumption is, or the allegations are, that my husband harmed my son on the day that he disappeared, the morning that he disappeared, and then after that he goes and works out at the gym. Only a sociopath would do something like that, and my husband is no sociopath. So she discredits any allegations or claims that the father had anything to do with the child's disappearance. Now, speaking about the father, when I had watched the episode of Macin's case on Disappeared, they interviewed the people that they interviewed on the show that were related to Macin. It was his mother and it was his sister. The father wasn't a part of the program at all. And I always thought, ever since then until now, I had always thought that it was a little bit odd that the father did not want to participate in the show. Now, I kind of just, checked it off to, maybe he's camera shy, he doesn't want to be on television, and that's fine. A lot of people are like that. They just don't want to be on TV. And so that's how I explained that away. But then at the same time, I would think to myself, if you are camera shy, this would be the one moment where you would try to get over that fear of being on camera, because you're trying to help locate your son. You're seeking help to find your child. So you would think that would be that one moment where he can set aside his fears of being on camera or being on television for the sake of his son. But, to each his own. I'm not going to use that against him, because we're all different when it comes to being on television and being in public and on camera and all of that. So, but it did, it did, I had to question that just a little bit. But so moving on from there. So law enforcement believes that most likely Macin met his demise at some point. Law enforcement said, as of now, or as of 2019, they said that they are no closer to knowing what happened to Macin than they were back in 2015. The case, as of 2019, still remains active. Previous leads have all been exhausted, and the only thing that they're doing right now with the case is just looking for new leads. Now, the parents, Tracy and Darren Smith, divorced in May of 2018 after 30 years of marriage. Macin disappeared in 2015, and the parents divorced in 2018 after 30 years of marriage. I think it's a safe bet to say that this was probably a catalyst to their marriage breaking up. And I always thought it was interesting when it came to parents of children who have either disappeared or who have met a more tragic fate, that you would think that would bring them closer together. After losing a child, you would think that would bring parents closer together, because only that other parent can understand what you're feeling and what you're going through. But in a lot of situations, and I think more often than not, when parents lose a child, it puts more strain on the marriage, and a lot of those couples end up separating and or divorcing. I've realized that. And I think from what I have seen, it's because they grieve differently. When they can't keep the marriage together after the loss of a child, it's because the parents grieve differently. One parent might try to just go on with life. The other parent wants to stay in that moment of grief, and they resent that in one another. The one who wants to move on resents the one that doesn't want to move on, and vice versa. And so it's really, really tragic, because something as devastating as that, you would think that would keep people together, hold y'all together, because only that person can understand the pain that you're feeling. Excuse me. September 2019, they conducted their last search for Macin, saying it was finally time for them to move on. When I say they, I'm referring to the parents. They conducted their very last search of their son. From the beginning, the parents always felt like law enforcement was not working with them, but working against them, treating them as suspects, etc. But that's what law enforcement do. They will always treat the ones closest to the victim as suspects. That's just, the name of the game, until the evidence can lead them elsewhere. Now, as far as my own theories on what could have happened to Macin, because I felt like if he had harmed himself, he would have been found. I think he would have been found. I don't think that when a teenager is in that state of mind, they are investigating extensively of places where they can go to where they can never be found. I don't think that they can't go that far, because he wasn't driving. He wasn't driving anywhere. He couldn't catch a flight anywhere. So he was relegated to just that area immediately around his home. So I feel like he would have been found. Also, another thing is, a neighbor had said that, I think it was mid-morning, she was out and about in the neighborhood on that same street, and she said that she had seen Macin walking. This is way after the bus would have picked him up, during a time when he should have been in school. She said that she had seen someone that looked a whole lot like Macin. And I think in the show Disappearance, she was pretty much convinced, because she says she knows him. That's my neighbor. I know him. I know what he looks like. She was pretty much adamant that who she saw walking around that time, that it was Macin. So if anything would have happened, if he would have harmed himself, or if something would have, if something happened to him, like an accident of some sort, he fell and hit his head somewhere, that he would have been found. There's a possibility that he was abducted by a third party. That's another possibility. This was around 2015, so I don't know exactly how common home security cameras were. I think they were pretty common during that time. So, like, I don't know. And that's another thing about this case, is that either he got on the bus or he didn't. Right? Either he got on the bus, either he left that house that morning or he didn't. I'm assuming there could have been surveillance cameras in that neighborhood. Nothing caught anything at all. I have a feeling that he didn't leave the house that morning. I don't think Macin left the house on September the 1st. I think something had happened to him the day before. Maybe he ran away the night before. Maybe he was harmed by someone else the night before. But I don't think he ran away the night before. And then another thing is, if the parents had done something to him, what do they do with Macin? You know, I don't think there was anything in the home that had led law enforcement to believe that Macin was hidden somewhere in that home. So what happened? He could have ran away. He could have ran away from home and then met his demise somewhere else, a lot further away than what I'm thinking. Maybe he got pretty far and something happened to him. It's just a big mystery how a child is there and then a child isn't there. So as far as the note that was found, I think the parents are inclined to believe that Macin had harmed himself. And I remember on the show Disappeared, when they talked about the note that Macin left, it was like a big mystery, because the mother said that she would not reveal what was in the note at that time. When I saw the show Disappeared, the mom had said that she would never reveal what was in the note. But later on, when I read, doing my research on the case, it said that in the note he talked about how angry he was towards his parents and that he wanted to harm himself. So I just don't know. I really don't know. This case has been a huge mystery because of the fact that he was a child, 17-year-old minor who didn't drive. He didn't have his own vehicle. In fact, I think his father was going to teach him how to drive somewhere around the time that he disappeared. His father was supposed to be giving him driving lessons. So he didn't know how to drive. It didn't seem like he had any help leaving, like, it's never been discussed if someone came and picked him up, if he had friends that had cars that came and picked him up and took him somewhere. He didn't have any money with him. He just walked out with the clothes on his back and just was never seen again. And I just really hope that this case is solved one day, obviously for the sake of the parents and the sake of the family. But this is just one of those cases that always stuck with me, on how this, teenager just vanished practically into thin air. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. On your way out, do not forget to rate the video if you like this content. Go ahead and subscribe, and I will definitely talk to you later. Bye.